Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming out. This is a great turnout here, and both online and here in person as well. Just to expand on the introduction, causality is a play on words. We work for a cause and we have an effect. But COS stands for Chief of Staff. And we specialize in Chief of Staff services to support CEOs and to support early stage companies in growing. We specialize in new products, commercialization, and development of strategic launch plans. But a launch plan is as good as a piece of paper. And you're only as good as you are in being able to execute your plans. So we also specialize in project execution of strategic initiatives. We help achieve operational efficiencies and the leadership cohesion amongst the C-suite and all staff members of an organization and cross-functional leaders. And we help prepare organizations for investor engagement and execution. I come from large industry. I had a 22-year career at Amgen. I specialized in the strategy and program management office and new products commercialization, but I've also come from the startup space. I'm a past CEO and co-founder of Kuryluk Technologies, where I now serve as chairman of the board. And thank you all for coming again. Really looking forward to today's presentation and your engagement in this presentation. The objective of this session and this workshop is to be able to understand how to research, analyze, and inform organizational strategic direction in the context of a marketplace. And following this session, you should be able to address the following: gain an understanding of the global healthcare environment and how the delivery of healthcare is changing. That's going to be the first part of today's session. Then we're going to move on to look at various commercialization frameworks, particularly in the context of competitive analysis and market segmentation. When you are developing or commercializing a medical device or a biopharmaceutical, it is absolutely critical to get your competitive analysis right and your market segmentation right, so you can inform your strategies and your tactics and how you go about launching your products. If you don't get this right, your organization will be in demise. It is mission critical. That's why we're going to talk about this today. So for competitive analysis, we're going to talk about, and you're going to get an understanding of how to effectively communicate your competitive landscape and how to effectively apply competitive information to inform key strategic and organizational decisions. For all of you who may be working for an organization that is bringing an innovation to the marketplace, this is an activity that you can't hide from. It is necessary, it is critical, and it is critically important to inform your strategy. Market segmentation is a different aspect of market analysis that informs your strategy. You're going to be able to succinctly articulate the market segment that you are targeting and learn how to effectively apply both qualitative and quantitative information about your target market segment to inform key strategic and organizational decisions. This is a snapshot of our agenda. So I'm first, just to get us going, I'm going to talk a little bit about the global market landscape for medical technology sector. From there, we'll talk about the concept of innovation to commercialization, and then springboard to both competitive frameworks and market segmentation models. We'll take a break, and following the break, we'll resume our session, talk about kind of efficient and effective ways to approach market analysis. And then we have a short workshop where we will have breakout groups, and then we will wrap up. I may ask for just a shorter break if you're welcome to that idea, with the intent of getting you out of here earlier. So let's try to strive and work together and do that today. Also, my presentation style is I welcome being interrupted. I just have to manage the time. But if you have any questions, if you have any comments with respect to any of the slides we're going to present, just put up your hand and speak out, or speak out through your mics online. I prefer an engaging dialogue with you than having just a didactic session where you have to listen to me for the next hour and a half and then go through the workshop. So I hope you all enjoy this session and get a lot out of it. It's something that is very near and dear to my heart and mission critical to startup organizations as well as established organizations. So let's first talk about global healthcare outlook. And before we start, just let's talk about what sources of information we can use to understand global healthcare. There's a lot that's accessible at your fingertips. There are industry reports and databases, news and media outlets, medical device indices, academic journals, trade associations, government and regulatory bodies. We have webinar and conferences. I don't know if you're all aware, but I think on October the 14th, there's a large MedTech conference here in Toronto. It's put on by Canada MedTech as well as AdvaMed, which is a US-based group. And this is going to be one of the largest MedTech conferences globally. It's very exciting. I'm gearing up to participate in that conference. Maybe some of you are as well. We also have a lot of consulting firms and think tanks. So what I'm going to do with you is share with you kind of how the global market is trending using some of these sources of information. And what I like to do is I like to look at the marketplace from three perspectives. One is, how is healthcare trending? Number two, how is the medical device industry trending kind of in alignment with healthcare trends? And finally, how is the investor market also trending in the context of the market landscape and all the other trends that we see in the marketplace? So let's first take a look at healthcare trends, and then we'll move on and talk about medical devices in more detail, and then the market. So I like the Deloitte report. So each year, all the big consulting firms like Deloitte, McKinsey, or BCG, they publish kind of their forecast on how the market is trending and how it will be changing over the next 5 to 10 year horizon. For the last couple of years, I've been analyzing the Deloitte reports, and I found them to be not only quite accurate, but quite informative of what the actual trends are. In this year's 2024 Global Health and Sector Outlook, Deloitte talks about 5 major drivers of the current healthcare trend. One is transforming healthcare with AI. Secondly, addressing cost and affordability. Third, responding to looming global shortfall in healthcare workers. 4, the role of social care. And 5, a sustainable future. This is an excellent read, and I urge all of you to read not only this report, but also the reports that come out from some of the other major consulting firms. These reports are available at your fingertips on the web. In respect to the top 3, which I'll focus on a little bit, we're seeing a transforming healthcare environment with AI. I mean, AI is everywhere. Where don't we see AI? And in particular, AI is not only shaping the future of medical technology, but it's also shaping the future of how healthcare institutions operate. One of the key areas of focus actually is to better predict the peak loads of patients in a hospital systems. Quite often, hospital systems are burdened with sudden infection rates of COVID or other flu-like infections, and we see the impact it has, on society as well as on healthcare workers. And that brings us, to the third point here, responding to the looming global shortfall in healthcare workers. During the pandemic, we saw a significant impact on healthcare workers and a loss of quite a few talented healthcare workers. It's projected that by 2030, we may have a shortfall of up to 10 million healthcare workers globally. This is a major challenge for our healthcare institutions and for our communities. So AI is not only addressing better efficiencies in how we manage caseloads, but it's also helping us to develop a better workplace for our workers and going forward. We also need to address cost and affordability. During the pandemic, we saw a major inflection in the cost of delivering healthcare. This not only includes labor costs, but non-labor costs as well. And in the next slide, I'll actually show you some analytics from McKinsey and Company on the cost of healthcare. So these are the major areas of attention going forward, according to Deloitte, over the next 10 years. Let's just take a look at two slides that build on this Deloitte story. McKinsey well demonstrates how costs are attributed to multiple cost segments of the healthcare delivery. What you can see in this slide is that we saw a substantial inflection point in during the pandemic in costs. In the dark blue, we see the non-labor costs. In the light blue, we see non-clinical labor costs. And in the black bars, we see clinical labor costs. Basically, we are seeing a substantial growth in costs across all sectors of our healthcare institutions. So there's a major opportunity there as well to use technology to address these costs and to find better efficiencies of how we operate as healthcare institutions across the globe. And IQVIA or IQVA have well demonstrated this. On the left, with the rise of telehealth as an example of how digital technology is being applied to improve healthcare efficiencies. On the left-hand side are real-world metrics that shows you the change that we saw in telehealth. So in 2021 compared to 2019, we saw a 2,900% growth in telehealth claims compared to 2019. And that was driven by the COVID environment. We had no choice as an institution. This is how we had to operate. But on the right-hand side of this slide, you can see the impact that we saw. This is published by the CARES Act, and it shows the trends of the use of telehealth during the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic. And you can see in those black bars and the dotted line that are intersecting those bars.
Remember that Tuesday?
I muted them. Sorry.
Okay, sorry?
You're good.
I can go on?
Yeah,
okay, thank you.
There's somebody else.
In the midst of 2020, in the black bar, you can see the rise of telehealth engagements. And in the dotted line, we actually saw a corresponding decline in emergency department visits. And these trends still continue today. And this is a great example of how we see emerging technologies such as digital technologies and telehealth having a substantial impact on the efficiencies of our healthcare institutions. This is phenomenal data by the CARES Act, and it's something that we will be following for a long time to come. Also, in the orange circle on the right-hand side, there you can see that digital health funding also grew in 2020 2 times over the previous years in terms of funding. They raised $29 billion in capital raise compared to the years past, which just shows you how the industry is driving digital health and telehealth technology to improve our healthcare systems. The Internet of Things is also substantially changing healthcare. IT is changing how healthcare as we know it by revolutionizing these following aspects that you see here below. In training, we're seeing advanced healthcare training. We can mimic patient symptoms. We can generate real-time feedback and remote training capability. In patient monitoring, we are now better connected. We have better connected medical devices. We can send data to telehealth teams in real time, faster interventions, likely to save lives. And in the preventative care space, we're now proactively monitoring vital signs and using wearables, and it signals the need for patients to see healthcare providers so we can avoid catastrophic events, which otherwise we couldn't have prior to these new technologies being available. And in healthcare institutions, we can improve workflow, streamline workflow, increase productivity, and increase earnings potential as well. That's the snapshot of healthcare and how it's changing. And it is rapidly changing before our eyes. I want to move on to the medical device marketplace right now. These are some of the major medical themes in the medical technology or medical device spaces. I call this just an exciting sandbox to play in. And all of you may be focusing on any one of these segments of medical technology that you see here. In the dark circles, we just see a major inflection here in medical technology evolution based on the impact of these areas: artificial intelligence, wearables, Internet of Things, robotics, 3D printing, remote patient monitoring, just to mention a few. And there's just so much more, as you can see on the slide here. And these are some of the top medical device global trends that we're seeing today. They're in the following 10 areas: wearables, medical robotics, immersive technologies, 3D printing, the Internet of Things, which I've already mentioned, AI, which we've mentioned. There's the importance of cybersecurity. We're sharing more personal information in the cloud than we ever have before. So cybersecurity is absolutely critical to protect your information that is shared with healthcare teams. And it is something that an area of focus that continues to grow every single day. We have focus on minimally invasive devices. There's also a focus on medical waste management and 5G. And I've also added on here two other items that are not listed in this one slide by Stardust Insights. We're also seeing some major regulatory shifts and market entry challenges, particularly in the EU. And there's a great focus on sustainability and inclusivity. So, it's really an exciting time to be able not only to witness all of these areas of medical technology moving forward and evolving, how we can improve the care of patients, but all of you in one way or another may be involved in some of these key areas that we show here. I like this slide because it shows you how the technology is changing the delivery of healthcare across the continuum of patient care, from prevention to diagnosis, treatment, monitoring of patients, and record keeping. So in the prevention space, we now have a ubiquitous, networked biosensor world. We have widespread genetic profiling to aid in precision medicine. In diagnosis space, we are now moving to real-time healthcare using AI. in diagnosis. In treatment, we're moving towards personalized medicine via genetic profiling and precision targeted drug delivery. In the monitoring of patients, there is a focus to move treatment at home using remote patient monitoring via connected medical devices. And in record keeping, of course, we're moving towards digital health records. I'm still surprised that we're still not fully there yet in this world, but we're still moving towards that direction globally. And we're better connected, and we have integrated IT systems across all stages of the patient journey. You know, just prior to COVID, we didn't see all of these trends. COVID was really a major catalyst, I think, that has moved medical technology and our healthcare space to a place that we haven't seen before. So it's exciting to see. And these trends that you see here with medical technology is clearly driving that evolution of healthcare that we talked about at the very beginning of this presentation. This slide here, a little bit of a different lens in looking at how technology is changing healthcare across the continuum from prevention to recording. But it's kind of showing what technologies are driving this change across that continuum. So we see blockchain playing a major role in the context of prevention and diagnosis and record keeping. Genomics is very heavily focused in the area of prevention, diagnosis, and treatment. 3D printing in the context of treatment. AI is very heavily focused on prevention and diagnosis, robotics in the space of treatment and monitoring, and health and fitness apps in the space of monitoring and record keeping. Virtual reality and augmented reality headsets are very heavily focused from prevention to treatment, and wearable medical devices are focused more on monitoring and record keeping. And finally, health IT systems are there's a focus across the entire continuum from prevention to record keeping. Question back there.
Yeah, thank you. I'm curious about what you mean by blockchain for prevention and diagnosis. Is there like an example you could highlight?
You know what? I will do that after our break today. I am not an expert in blockchain, but my peers are. But blockchain is an area that is impacting how systems operate, and their interoperability of our systems is critically important to speak to each other. So we had systems that were once incompatible to speak to each other, but with virtual healthcare and with healthcare being analyzed up in the cloud and sharing of information, blockchain plays a really critical, important role in helping enable that. And we'll get into more details later.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. New technologies in healthcare is also changing the supply chain. So I know the font is small in these boxes, but on the left-hand side is the past supply chain. On the right-hand side is the future supply chain. And in the future supply chain, we're seeing a change with providers as well as manufacturers. With providers, we're seeing more cloud infrastructure providers, more artificial intelligence providers, app developers, cybersecurity providers, and genome sequencers. In manufacturing, we're seeing a growth in medical sense makers, wearable medical device makers, ingestible device makers, robot manufacturers, and biometric clothing manufacturers. Just as a few examples, I think the key message to take away from here is that we're just seeing more supply chain players and much more complexity in the marketplace as we go forward in this new world of healthcare. Let's take a brief look at the investor market and how it's trending. we saw here in kind of the 2021 and particularly in the 2022 time frame, we saw a really difficult market. This was kind of all markets were struggling at that time. And it was a trend that was concerning for the health tech sector. But you can see here in 2024, we have a promising uptick. So in 2024, the global medical device market is demonstrating robust growth. Its expected revenue is approximately $595 billion globally. It's driven by AI-powered devices and an increased demand for telemedicine and wearable health technologies, amongst all those other technologies that we saw on the previous slide. I mean, they're too long to mention here. But it's projected to maintain a CAGR growth of about 6.1% from 2022 to 2030. So good, healthy growth for this marketplace. The venture capital landscape for medical devices remains active, though today, following the collapse of the Silicon Bank, they're really more selective in who they're choosing to invest in. So if an organization has a minimal viable product or a near final product, there's much more interest for faster returns in their investments. They're clearly gearing to support companies more with a final product, just in general. So I think organizations who are out there and they're pitching to VCs for funding, the key is to convey how you are a de-risked organization and why they should invest in you. The overall investment environment remains cautious, but with VCs prioritizing companies that have clear regulatory pathways and strong commercialization strategies, including IP strategies and IP protection, companies that are nearing final product development and so forth. So it is a challenging environment for all organizations who are pitching for funding, but those who are better prepared have a good shot. Why do they have a good shot? Well, the medtech industry and the medical device space in particular is going through rapid transformational growth. There's a unique potential to completely revolutionize global healthcare as we know it today. And for emerging companies or investors interested in this space, I believe there has never been a better time to do so. And that more or less is just a snapshot of what the global healthcare and medical technology environment looks like. Before I go on to the next section, innovation to commercialization frameworks, are there any questions or comments? Don't be shy. Okay. What's your name?
Alex, or Alexandra, or Alex.
Hi, Alexandra.
Hi. So in regards to you said that the VCs are a little bit more apprehensive in terms of investing in medical devices. Is this mainly because of I guess regulatory hoops? There's more regulatory hoops when it comes to medical devices, or is it is it just because most, or in your opinion, where do most commercializations fail in the commercialization stage?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wouldn't, maybe the word apprehensive wasn't the best term to use. I would say they're just more selective now. We have data that shows the number of investments that were made sharply declined during this decline in marketplace that you saw here. And that's because, inflation was skyrocketing, interest rates were skyrocketing, the cost of doing business was increasing, and we saw markets declining rapidly. So clearly, investor groups such as angel investors and venture capital firms, are faced with hard choices of selecting organizations that really is the best fit for their operating models and to bring the best returns for their investors who are nervous during when seeing these kinds of trends that we see here. I think this approach to being more selective still continues today, even though we're seeing an uptick in the marketplace. In regards to the regulatory hurdles, I think they were always there. And I think that is a little bit more of a constant. I think the US regulatory system has created a framework for early stage companies to navigate quite, I would say, effectively with the FDA, and same with Health Canada as well. So I don't see regulatory as a major issue, although those companies that have a better regulatory, I would say, pathway or an easier regulatory pathway addressing a very large market may be more attractive than those companies who may have a more complex regulatory pathway and a smaller market, for example. So it's all these combination of things that a VC looks out for to decide on whether an organization is a good fit or a not a good fit for them. And a lot of that is based on how they look at risk. And what they are seeking are companies that are attractive and more de-risked than those companies that are not. That was an excellent question. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? There. What's your name?
Hi, I'm Theo.
Theo? Hi.
Nice to meet you. I have a question about kind of dovetailing off your last point about VCs and looking at medical devices. I know medical devices, it often takes a lot longer to get to market and become profitable. I was wondering, how does that compare to other industries? I was wondering, how does that factor into a VC's decision to invest? Does it pay off after much higher?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, every medical device has a different, every organization will have a unique business model to bring a medical device to the marketplace. Some companies have a faster path than others. Some companies are addressing a larger market than others. Some of these companies are facing considerable competition and may be deemed more risky than others where the competitive landscape maybe looks more attractive. So it all depends on pricing, reimbursement hurdles, and all of those factors above. And what the VCs do, they just weigh in all of these different factors to give them a sense of how quickly can this technology be adopted and how quickly can they start generating revenues. They may forecast what the uptake will be in the short term, but also the growth potential in the long term. So based on all of those factors, they form more or less a judgment on how they view these different companies as either more attractive or less attractive. And based on all of those factors, they ultimately make decisions on who to invest in. It's not uncommon for VCs to invest in 1 out of 100 organizations to pitch to them. This is not an easy space. And for those companies that are better prepared to pitch and they're well rehearsed and they have done their due diligence, they have good competitive assessments, good market segmentation, and clear market segmentation models, and how that plays into their strategy is vitally important. That's why we're going to talk about all of this today, because it plays into how you ultimately position yourself to succeed in the marketplace. Let's take one more question and then we'll move on. What's your name? Lillian? Hi, Lillian. By the way, just one second. Clara, can the audience hear the questions when,
That's a great
or should I
question.
repeat the questions?
I think I would repeat them, but
Okay.
I haven't had any complaints yet. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Lillian, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, with the interest rate going down, maybe more opportunities down the road. But I'm also wondering, in terms of investors, when they look at the medical device sector, is there any particular sectors that we prioritize for their? Let's see, we only have just limited funding.
Yeah.
Is there any particular sectors we will see view as a more good return on investment, shorter cycle, so it's more attractive to them?
Thank you. The question from Lillian was, what is the impact of the recent reduction in interest rates? And secondly, are there any medtech sectors that currently are more attractive than other medtech sectors, for example? What I can tell you is I am an investor. I'm a member of the Brampton Angels, and we quite often assess many pitches from medtech companies, and I can tell you, when you hear of interest rates going down, it excites investors. It definitely, if we can see also a reduction in inflation, a reduction in interest rates, it all comes down to a better environment for investing. So the answer is yes. That does definitely bring, I think, an upbeat environment amongst all investors globally. So the answer is yes. In regards to the question of, are there any medical devices or technologies that are sought after more than others? It may depend on the uniqueness of the VCs. Many VC organizations have a vision, they have a mission. Some of them align more with SaaS technologies. Others may align more with equipment and or manufacturing. So it's hard to answer that question broadly. I think it's very unique and specific to various angel firms and investor firms. I think there's no denying, though, that everyone is looking out for how AI, for example, is radically changing technology for the betterment of our healthcare system. And there's a great interest in the areas of wearables and robotics, because these devices have demonstrated a massive impact on healthcare delivery, and they've also have demonstrated promising sales and revenues. So I think there's great interest there. And the other areas that there's a focus on, continued focus on telemedicine, for example. And so I think that there's a lot of sectors that currently are a little bit more attractive than others, but that's not to deny an organization who is not in that space, that is addressing an unmet need and has a large market that they can penetrate, and they can change the healthcare system radically as well. So I would say there's a diamond in the rough for every VC to find, and their job is to align with an organization, I think, that meets their cultural values, as well as their growth and what they're looking for. So I hope that answers some of the question.
Fantastic. And also, do they prefer to invest in the new firm, or do they want to vertically integrate it, because then that can help them grow even better?
Yeah, the question is, do they want to integrate in a new firm or an established firm across various verticals? The answer is both. I think as long as there's an organization that has a story to tell, and they project substantial revenues and growth and opportunity, there's always an investor who is willing to place a bet on that organization. Thank you. Let's change gears right now and talk about innovation to commercialization. This is another favorite subject matter of mine. This slide here shows you a detailed and accurate commercialization roadmap is critical to ensure success. Okay, if you look at the image on the right-hand side, on the top, we have a product development process for a medical technology. You should all be familiar with this product development process. It moves from device discovery and concepts to preclinical research and prototype to pathway to approval. And within there somewhere, you have your final product in your pathway to approval. There's filing and regulatory review, launched and post-launch, safety monitoring, and any changes to your technology as part of your life cycle management of that technology and your organization. Product development delivers a product, but it doesn't deliver it to the bedside of a patient. And that's where commercialization is distinct and unique and different than product development, although it includes the product development pathway. Medical device commercialization is highly aligned with the product development process. From discovery to development, marketing, manufacturing, regulatory approval, right through to safety monitoring and life cycle management of patients. And what you can see in the black bars today below here is an overall process that includes device discovery, your MVP stage, moving to final product stage, managing your supply chain, managing quality assurance, regulatory engagement, the clinical program, manufacturing and operations scale up, packaging and distribution strategy, your pre-launch strategy, your launch strategy, pricing and market access. How is the product going to be paid for example, and launch. It touches every person of an organization. And when I'm on the investor side overviewing a pitch presentation from a startup company, what I want to see is that they have a grasp of their overall commercialization strategy. Because if you have a hiccup on any one of these pathways, or I call work streams, it can derail your organization. So I get into the weeds, and I would like to know who in these organizations are managing these work streams. Is it internal, or do you have outsourced partners? How are you working together? And I look for any potential red flags across these, or I also look for an organization that has a grasp of every moving part to bring your product to the marketplace, and that they are achieving operational excellence as an organization in delivering their product. That gives me confidence. That's what I look out for. So when you are working with organizations that are delivering a product, these are the things that you should be looking out for as well to ensure that you succeed in bringing a product to the marketplace. Let's just look at a high-level concept of medical device product development and commercialization activities. So you have a management oversight. Management defines the strategies, the portfolio of products that you work with, or it could be one product for a very early stage company. And it sets roadmaps, and it puts resources in place to help you deliver. A project idea is selected. It enters a process of product development, and you need to understand the customer need, define the value proposition, and analyze the business value of an idea. From there, markets are analyzed. Competitor analysis is performed. That's what we're talking about today. Market segments are understood, and your go-to market is communicated. Customer benefits, positioning, and messaging platforms are also created. There's an engineering group that works in parallel to the business group. The engineering starts generating and evaluating solutions, including project uncertainties. They confirm direction, value proposition, and feasibility of developing the product. And design controls are put in place. These are good engineering practices. They demonstrate evidence that supports your product is safe, it's effective, and based on the intended use or indications for use. And there are what we call these gates. And the gates are structured throughout the process for evaluating and decision making. So each gate evaluates the work that was performed. And a gate is also usually placed where there's a major milestone. So for example, the development of your MVP, your minimal viable product. There may be a gate for your final product, and there needs to be a thorough evaluation of your final product before you move on to testing your final product in a clinical setting. It makes sense. And then there are gates prior to the clinical setting, prior to clinical trials, and gates after your clinical trials to evaluate your outcomes and how that plays into what your product label will be and your indication, and that plays into the potential of your product. So this is what happens during the commercialization process. Again, we're just looking kind of a high-level concept, but it's really what all organizations need to do. This is actually a real-world example of a commercialization model by a company called Xeros. They manufacture surgical instruments. And on the left-hand side, you can see here the product development process. That is this bar here. Again, the one that we just reviewed that goes from discovery right through to launch of a product. Well, what Xeros does, they developed kind of an internal model that guides their organization in what they have to do across every single stage. And stage 0 for them is idea creation and gathering. Stage 1 is initiation, feasibility. Stage 2 is concept and definition. 3 is design and development. 4, transfer to manufacture. 5, regulatory. 6, post-launch. Every organization will have their own framework, and they're going to use their own nomenclature to describe these stages. But the concept is simple. You go from an idea to a product that you're going to launch in the marketplace. And on the right-hand side, you can see the activities that they perform across all of these stages of commercialization. And those activities, it's common sense. In the idea creation stage, you're doing literature reviews, you're doing technology scouting, the internal R&D team gather to discuss these concepts. And then when you move to initiation and feasibility, it's examine the proof of concept and develop a prototype, and initial proposals and business plans are generated. I'm not going to go through all of this in detail, but I think the gist of this is to understand that commercialization is more than product development, and it includes every aspect of your organization. And this is one example. This is just a snapshot of all of the facets that commercialization touches in any one organization. For startup companies, nobody is spared. Everybody is involved one way or another. And these areas include not only those facets that are required or specified by regulations, but also those that are not regulated as well. So this is why product launches are exciting, but you can also see why it's costly, because it consumes everybody and your partners, your internal, external, and no one is really untouched by this. So it's really important to get it right. You can't afford to make mistakes, because for an early stage company, it can spell your demise. So the question is, when you are now moving forward with an idea and you're moving along your commercialization path, where do you start as an early stage company or a startup? Have you all heard of the business canvas model? You've probably all participated in developing a conceptual business canvas model or perhaps a real world business canvas model. These are models that are quite often used in a lot of startup accelerators, across the globe. You have formal strategic planning and implementation models that takes you from market understanding to strategy development, your tactics, and your execution of those strategies. In my organization, we developed something that's kind of a hybrid between these two. It's called the market opportunity assessment. And the market opportunity assessment is a simple framework that allows you to crisply articulate the problem that you are solving, your product uniqueness, your value proposition, your target customers, your go-to market, your competitors, as well as your strategy. Now, for today, we don't have enough time to go through every single one of these elements of this market opportunity assessment. But what we are going to do is we're going to talk about competition and segmentation as two components of that market opportunity assessment. And I would be happy to come back and talk about all the other elements of that assessment. But a good market opportunity assessment is needed in order for you to devise your strategies. And then from there, you're able to create your commercialization roadmaps. So those roadmaps that you saw before with all those black bars, each of those commercialization work streams, it's really hard to develop all of that if you do not have a good strategy in place and a strategy that's informed by a good market opportunity assessment. Particularly the marketing and sales work stream of the overall commercialization framework. So why focus on competition and segmentation and value proposition? The competitive analysis helps you determine how you will impact the market, and it informs you on your value proposition. And it's much more than that. We're going to talk about that when we get to competitive analysis. Market segmentation identifies the distinct customer segments with unique characteristics and behaviors. It informs your go-to market. Some technologies can be implemented across various different market segments that are unique, but it's rare that a startup organization can launch a product across all these market segments at the same time. You just don't have the resources to do so. So what we usually do is identify a go-to market, and that go-to market gives us a beachhead. You have to win in that marketplace, succeed, grow, and then when you have additional resources, you can then expand into other market segments. And we're going to talk about that today. And competition, competitive analysis, and market segmentation plays a critical role in supporting your strategy. So this is a slide that was generated in an excerpt from a book. It's actually a very short read. It's called The Playbook for Strategy, and it was adapted from Rotman magazine several years ago. Rotman team created this in partnership with a think tank from Harvard, as well as US and Canadian industry leaders. And what they say is that a good strategy should answer 5 questions. Number 1, what is your winning aspiration? Where do you want to go? How do you want to get there? Number 2, where will you play in the marketplace? You have to define that clearly. Number 3, how will you win in that marketplace? Number 4, what management systems are required to help you get there? Do you have the capabilities? Do you have the systems in place to be able to execute a comprehensive commercialization strategy and what capabilities must be in place in order for you to do that. So competition and market segmentation helps you answer those first two questions. Where will you play in the marketplace and how will you win? That's why we're focusing on that today. They're really mission critical. The other items we can talk about at another time. Okay, we're going to talk about competition. Any questions about the concept of innovation to commercialization? Any comments? Hi, what's your name?
My name is Tabby.
Tabby, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
So as you said that it's impossible to market or commercialize device in all of the market of the different markets in the world at a one time. But the medical device technology is very easy to copy. You know, it's like suppose I have launched device in the market and someone can make a little changes in the technology and relaunch it as their device. I know there's some IPs and patent is there, but like how do you protect it, or like how do you see it as an investor when you invest in a company or organization?
Yeah, great question. So the question was, you know, organizations may not be able to launch their product across all geographical market segments because there are business market segments, but there's also geographical market segments. And how do you protect your technology from being, for example, copied? And how do you manage this in the context of protecting your organization, and how do you manage those discussions with investors as well? I think the answer largely lies to good IP strategy, first of all. What I look for in an organization to help me determine and assess this risk or this opportunity, if it's well managed by a company, is by understanding its business model and understanding its IP strategy. So, for example, is an organization have a long-term vision of launching their product globally? And if so, as I mentioned, it's unlikely they have the resources to launch across all global jurisdictions at the same time, because there are business and cultural difference in every jurisdiction around the world that requires unique fine-tuning of a global strategy. So what I look for is kind of how they declare themselves. Are they going to do it alone? And do they have the capacity to do it alone? And are they raising the funds that positions them to do it alone? And do they have the talent and the capabilities to do so? Or I look at their sequence of entering marketplaces. So quite often, I think the US marketplace is the most attractive marketplace globally for medical technology. So quite often, VCs put a lot of attention on organizations who are launching in the US marketplace first, and that they have a strategic plan on how to bridge to other jurisdictions around the world, whether you're crossing a border or whether you're going overseas. So what I look out for as well are out-licensing opportunities through a smart IP strategy, because if you have a strong global IP portfolio, you can then position yourself to out-license your product or create partnerships with other organizations to launch your technology globally. That is often the path with early stage companies who are cash strapped. For those companies that may be developing now their third or fourth a product following, you know, a successful track record, they may be in a different position where they already have satellite organizations around the world, or what I call company affiliates, where they can perhaps launch on their own. So really depends on where they are in the life cycle, what they envision in their business plan, and third, how their IP portfolio positions them to make deals. That's one way I like to look at it, and that gives me an understanding of whether they have a good management team that really has thought this through, or whether they haven't thought it through, and thus they bring risks to the organization and thus to the investor.
Just,
Another question?
yeah, just out of curiosity, you file a patent, let's say in Canada or in the US, does that patent protect you worldwide despite of, I know you have to, when you launch product, you have to go through the regulatory and market access approval, right? But if you just file the patent, does that, like if you just file the patent in Canada or US, does that protect you worldwide?
The answer is no. The question is, if you file for a patent in the United States or in Canada, are you protected in other jurisdictions around the world? The answer is no. So you can, in the organization that I led, Kuryluk Technologies, we have a global patent strategy that more or less protects us in every jurisdiction around the world where we want to sell our products. Otherwise, if there's an organization that has the courage to copy your technology, because you can always sue them, right? And most likely win, but you likely don't have the cash to also have a legal battle. Nobody wins with a legal battle. But generally speaking, organizations should file a strong patent strategy in all the jurisdictions around the world where they expect to sell their technology. And patent strategy is costly. And that's why when we raise funds to drive the entire commercialization process, including the patent strategy work stream as well. Great question. Thank you. Okay, we're going to talk about competition. Are you guys with me? Okay, right on. Do you hear me okay in the back? Can you hear me okay online? Okay. So competition. Why emphasis on competition? It drives innovation. If you don't do a good competitive analysis, it can spell your demise because you can be caught by surprise. Nobody wants to be caught by surprise. It informs your value proposition and your competitive advantage. And it's critical to be able to identify a competitor, determine the potential impact of that competitor, and to strategically maneuver accordingly. I can tell you this, the competition probably knows more about you and your organization than you know about it. So it's really important to be astute from a competitive perspective. Who are competitors? Well, they're companies that offer the same or a similar product. It could have geographic overlap or price similarities. It could be companies that offer substitutes for your product. It could be companies with related competencies that potentially could copy something or similar, develop something similar to your product. It can also be status quo or a current standard of care. Some technologies can be so disruptive that maybe the marketplace is not prepared yet for such change. So I think that disruptive technologies are exciting. We need good disruption for good change, but sometimes there may not be an appetite for a certain level of disruption if the ecosystem around you is not prepared to move along the path where you need to go. So when status quo is very important, sometimes certain groups may look at status quo or the standard of care saying it's just fine. So the key is to elevate the argument. Well, it's not just fine. We have a problem. We're solving the problem. Here's what we have, and that's part of selling. That's part of raising awareness of a gap in our industry. How you plan to address that gap with your innovation and the promise that it brings. And if there's a willingness to pay for your technology, there will be investors that will be ready to invest in your technology. The rationale of performing competitive analyses is the fact that a single product market is rare or short-lived. A lot of firms might feel relieved to say, hey, we have such a unique innovation. We're the only ones in the marketplace. Not for long. As long as you're doing well, there will be a competitor. Don't ever forget that. So each competitor has their own aspirations, but a good competitive analysis positions you to anticipate a market entry of a competitor, develop winning strategies to win over that competitor, establish a competitive advantage, and ultimately succeed. So in the space of biopharmaceuticals and medical devices, there are several types of competitive analyses that can be performed. These include how we can look at how launched products are performing. This is called just a market performance competitive analysis. Sometimes VCs may ask you, who's the market leader? Or who keeps you up at night amongst all your competitors? You have to have an answer. And if they're asking you, how are they trending? How are they doing? There are some of your competitors may be trending up. Some other competitors may be trending down for whatever reasons. And from all of those competitors, you're likely going to be paying attention to 1, 2, or 3 in order to maneuver in the marketplace. There's the pipeline funnel. The pipeline funnel looks at who do we pay attention to coming down the pipeline. So you may be further ahead than some competitors to get to the market first, but there's someone right behind you. Who is it? How many are there? We'll talk about the pipeline funnel. That's one of my favorite competitive assessments because there really is a wave of new technologies coming. You're just one of many organizations. There's a competitor matrix. That one helps you differentiate yourself. How are you different from those competitors? And then there's the strategic analysis. That helps you view what are the threats and how serious are those threats. So some people ask me, well, which of these competitive assessments should I do? Well, in my opinion, if you have the resources, do them all. I think it's important to know who's out there already. How are they performing? I think it's important to know who's coming behind you or who's in parallel with you. Third, how are you different? 4, and how serious are those other threats out there and how do you compare to them? For me, that's a proper competitive analysis. But I'm going to show you how you can do these analyses really quite efficiently. So this is what a market performance competitive analysis looks like. It's usually like a linear graph or a pie chart, a linear graph showing trends in sales, or a pie chart showing market share in an organization. It will show you who a market leader is. Some of them are have maybe 80% of the market. Some of them could maybe have a sliver of that market. Gives you a really good perspective of who to pay attention to. So it shows the competitors, it illustrates their performance, identifies a market leader trend, and you can capture a 5-year trend if applicable. And later we'll talk about where you can get your hands on various sources of information to perform these kinds of assessments. But they're out there. Question?
Sorry, just a quick question. At what point in the product development process should market analysis be done? Or should market analysis be guiding the product development at all? Or should it, at what point should
the question is, at what point should a competitive assessment be done in the context of maybe, let's say, your product development process or overall commercialization model? There is in the organizations that I work for, we do a high level competitive assessment very early on. For example, in the minimal viable product phase, because we still don't know if we have a final product yet. So therefore, it doesn't make sense to put too many resources in defining a market if we don't know we have a final product yet. But you remember when I talked about those gates in the commercialization process? Quite often is each gate should should also unveil a source of resources. In other words, as you move along, each check mark that you put along your entire commercialization path, you're getting closer to launching a product, right? Does it make sense? So as you move along that commercialization pathway, that is when funding grows in order to develop your product. You start with an idea, they say, okay, explore it. By the end, when you're approaching launch, you've engaged the whole organization in moving this forward and launching it into the organization. So I do what's called a stepwise approach with market analysis that starts at a high level, and then by the time that you launch, it's very detailed, and we know the marketplace inside out. I know what the competitors are eating at lunch. You know what I mean? That's what we want to do when we're launching a product. Okay, there's the competitive funnel. This allows us to pay attention to who's coming down the pipeline. It identifies a company's product, class, category of product, stage of development. It's a good review as a starting point. It facilitates the identification of specific competitors where later you can do a deeper analysis, and it positions you to prioritize who to pay attention to. So this is a real world example. A company was developing a product for, this is not a device, but same concept applies. They were developing a product for the treatment of acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And they were nearing phase 3 clinical trials. And of course, the CEO asked the key question of, well, who's behind us and who else are developing these products? Well, what you can see here is a model. It looks like a pipeline funnel. On the left-hand side are the companies that are entering this funnel as a very early stage. And on the right-hand side are companies that are already in phase 3 clinical trials. The legend is very powerful because the legend helps you identify not only the class of products that are being developed to treat acute lymphoblastic leukemia, but this model that you see here also shows you the name of the product, the name of the company, and then you can go into clinicaltrials.gov and collect all kinds of information on these products here that are in clinical trials. There's a question in the back?
Yeah, sorry, I just had a question. In a situation where you aren't going through clinical trials, how do you get this information? Like, is this public? Can you tell who's developing what?
Oh yeah, there's all kinds of sources of information. We're going to get to that in just a moment. There are journals. You have the power of AI and GPT, right? Now market research departments can grow their staff tenfold. GPT-1, GPT-2, GPT-3, 4, 5, right through to 10. And you can really improve your productivity, but be careful. GPT plays back a lot of what's already in the web stream, right? Not all information is accurate. Your job is to determine what is accurate by basically sourcing your information. And we'll talk about sources of information for market research. There are poor and weak sources of information and strong sources of information. So we'll get to that in a moment. Great question. Thank you. Okay. Next one is the competitor matrix. I love this one. As a investor, I seldom see a pitch presentation that does not have a good competitor matrix model. A competitor matrix allows you to demonstrate how you're differentiated from the competition. It allows you to do a deeper dive on competitors, understand how they're differentiated, informs on product development. It informs you on the competitive advantage and overall strategy. It looks like this box that you see below. You have your product compared with competitor X, Y, and Z, and you're comparing it against a set of attributes that you think is important, that the market thinks is important, that the healthcare industry thinks is important. So you got to make this realistic, right? And there's some real world examples. This is a company that develops a mandibular splint. By the way, we're going to do an exercise later on the mandibular splint. But this isn't the actual exercise. The mandibular splints are often used to treat what? Sleep apnea, right? Sleep apnea repositions your jaw, and it can be used to treat sleep apnea, amongst other conditions. And on the left-hand side here, we can see a list of attributes that are important, such as, right, allows for speech, the materials, is appropriate for, you know, various uses. So it's a little bit blurry on this screen, so sorry about that. But I think you get, though, the idea of this. And on the top axis, you can see all the different mandibular device manufacturers. And some of them, they all have strengths and weaknesses. And this kind of shows you how those strengths and weaknesses are mapped out against these attributes that you see on the left-hand side. This is another example of positive airway pressure devices, like a CPAP device that is also being used to treat sleep apnea. It's a grid, and it just shows you all the competitors and how they stack up against each other. This allows you to show not only your strengths, it could also expose some weaknesses of your technology. But the idea here is that your innovation should really have more strengths than weaknesses in the context of a competitor matrix, in order to demonstrate how well you're differentiated and why the healthcare community and investors should be excited in what you are developing. This is a real world example of a third example of a company called Axelis. And when they were pitching several years ago, this was in their pitch presentation. They were developing a therapeutic to halt, slow, or reverse the progression of neurodegenerative disease, such as Huntington's and Parkinson's disease. And their lead compound was called OXD4. And below it, on the left-hand side, you can see the other products that are being used to treat this condition. And on the top axis, you can see the variables that they have chosen, the attributes that they feel are important for the treatment of neurodegenerative disease. This included broad range of symptoms and diseases, regaining function, minimal side effects, and oral delivery. And what you can see here is why they were excited about OXD4, because if they were able to prove this in the clinical trial setting, then they clearly have a product label that is superior to all the competition that is out there. That's why we do a competitive matrix, to be able to demonstrate this. Finally, okay, question?
What about pricing? Does that go into the competitive matrix? Because I feel like sometimes there might not be like advantage in terms of like a superiority in terms of the nature, but maybe if it's cheaper, it can still be, you know.
Yeah, the question that's being asked is, what about pricing? Can pricing be included in a competitive matrix? The answer can be yes, but quite often with early stage companies, they don't announce their pricing, or they don't convey their pricing in the context of this model. It's not uncommon that new innovations are priced higher than other competitors as well. So I think you want to be really careful to put pricing on here. What I would rather see is access rather than pricing. You know, if you have a smart market access strategy, you could make that a competitive advantage. So you could possibly include that on here, but I think pricing is maybe more appropriate for the next example that I'm going to show you for a competitive matrix. So the last one that we look at is called the strategic analysis matrix. This helps you evaluate the impact of a competitor strategy, and it informs scenario planning. I mean, I recall using this model when I was the head of new products commercialization in my former life. I would always be asked by my boss, well, what company keeps you up at night, and why? Well, we were developing a therapeutic for lung cancer, and you can develop a grid like this that helps you analyze competitors across various dimensions. The dimensions in this example is on the left hand or the x-axis you have, or y-axis you have the probability of achievement, and then also the potential impact of these organizations. Some organizations are better positioned to deliver a positive clinical trial based on the resources that they have put into the program and their knowledge of various disease states and the experience they have working with various compounds. So based on our literature review of how these compounds work and the track record of these companies, we were able to plot all the competitors on this strategic grid. And the ones that keep me on the right are the ones on the very top right. Those companies that have a higher probability of achievement or delivering their new product, and those that would have the highest potential impact in the marketplace. Question?
There's a question online.
Okay, there's a question online.
They asked, how do you assign a probability of achievement to each compound/company?
Yeah, the question is how do you achieve a probability of achievement in against a compound and or company? That falls in doing your due diligence, such as literature reviews, for example. There are, for anyone working in the space of a disease setting, they typically know all the compounds that are being evaluated in clinical trials. And we know what the past failures were. We know what compounds have succeeded in earlier stage clinical trials. And from there, you can do a modeling exercise to more or less project or predict the likely outcome of future clinical trials. I mean, it comes with a risk, but we do evaluations like that to determine the probability of success, and more intelligence as well. That was a great question. Thank you. This is just a little bit of a different way of doing such an assessment. There was a company called BrainFX, and they developed clinical digital assessment tools for healthcare professionals to diagnose various brain disorders. And so their X and Y axis was completely different. Here, they showed those interventions that go from being people-driven, you know, pencil and paper following an interview of a patient, to technology-driven, or just the tool, or insight and strategy-driven. And they positioned their organization on the top right, where they feel there's a sweet spot where technology-driven meets insight and strategy. So this is just a really novel way of an organization thinking out of its box, showing where they fit in a strategic competitive matrix grid. Brilliant work by them. So those are just some of the examples of competitive analysis. I think the key takeaways are always be astute about competitive threats, the who, the when, the how, and that competitive landscape needs to inform your key strategic decisions. Imagine not doing any of these competitive assessments and moving forward with developing and commercializing a medical device. How do you do that? It's incomprehensible to me. So that's why we're talking about it today. Okay, I'm going to move to market segmentation, and then we're going to take a break. Market segmentation. Oh, wait, before I continue to move on, are there any questions? While I just check the time here. Okay, good. Any questions or comments? All right. So market segmentation is a process of identifying unique segments of an addressable market. It can be driven by qualitative or quantitative data. The goal is to identify distinct segments of a customer, of customers that make up your total addressable market. I think it's important to know the cascade model in this. If you are talking to an investor, they may ask you, what's the total addressable market? They may ask you, what is your target market? There's a difference between the two. The total addressable market are all the potential markets and customers that you can you can sell your technology in. The served addressable market are the segments that align with your value proposition and capabilities, and your go-to market is the market that you plan to launch your technology in. It's not uncommon where you launch in a go-to market and then potentially expand into other market segments, moving up this cascade. Market segmentation positions you to examine your opportunities across market segments. It informs on key activities. It allows for targeted strategies, and it enables for succinct articulation of your target customers. And it answers a lot of critical questions that you see here, right? How big is the opportunity? How does your value proposition align with the needs of your market? And what is your go-to market strategy? So how do you do a segmentation model? There's several ways in which you can do it. One thing, though, that's common with all of them is that it is usually accomplished in a stepwise manner. There are numerous approaches can be used. You always use variables, right, to define your market segments. And the market segmentation is the totality of the distinct segments that make up a total addressable market. So let me look at two models and show you where these models are often used. This is the single segment cascade model, and it's an example for a medical imaging device company. Here, they're using geographic, demographic, psychographic, and behavioral variables to convey their market from a very large, a total addressable market to their go-to market. So their thought process is their total addressable market is European countries, such as Germany, for example. That's a very large geographical market. The demographic variable, they say that they're focusing on radiologists and group of buyers in hospitals that have 200 to 500 beds. Then third, psychographic variable, they want to focus on those hospitals where they place a premium on customer service and willing to adopt new technologies. And finally, the behavioral variable, they're focusing on those institutions who perform more than 20,000 image procedures per month. Brilliant thought process. It really helps them identify this is who we're launching our product to, and then later they will worry about going up to address the other segments. Question?
So can we look at this as can we look at each level as a filter? As it gets
Sure, it's a filter. Absolutely. Yeah. It's a cascade model, but you create the variables for that filter. And the variables, they can vary. Here's a company that used all kinds of great secondary and primary market research information to create a single segment model for a new product used to treat hypertension. So they use this to inform their forecast at the beginning, their revenues in the first year of launch. The way that they did that, they said, look, there's 50 million hypertension patients in the United States when this was done. Number two, about 10.2 million of those, approximately 20%, are at high risk for a cardiovascular event. Number three, of those that are at a high risk for a cardiovascular event, there's about 3 million that are not at their treatment goal. Those are the patients that are in danger while taking the currently available medications that are available. Those are the patients they are going after. And then finally, they're also going after those that have private insurance, where their drug can be paid for prior to getting an expansion of their market access. About 20% of those patients. It's hard to argue with anyone using this kind of a thought process with both qualitative and quantitative market research intervention to support it. Okay. Next is the strategic grid market segmentation model. Actually, before I go on to here, the single cascade model, I think, is brilliant to show you what your total addressable market is wither down to your go-to market. Those are the patients that should have access to your technology at launch. And quite often, organizations use that segmentation model to back up their talking points around revenue forecast and the potential of your product at launch. Market segmentation model using the strategic grid is for a different purpose. This is a visual snapshot of distinct segments defined by actionable and meaningful variables that make up a total addressable market. You could have geographic variables, psychographic, demographic, behavioral, and industry variables as well. I want to show you how this is done. It really is a step, 3 steps in this process. Step number 1 is you create your market segment variables in the blue boxes that you see here, right? 2 dimensions, right? Your x-axis and your y-axis. And these variables should be actionable and meaningful, and they should allow you to identify distinct segments. Here's an example. I was developing a drug with my organization for the treatment of hyperdyslipidemia, high cholesterol. And what this shows you, this grid on this axis here, is that all patients with high cholesterol are either treated by a family doctor, most of them are, but for those that are have difficulty with that, they can be treated by a specialist as well, a cardiologist, an endocrinologist, or an internal med patients. If you look at the top, we see 3 different categories of patients. Those that are at low risk, that can be managed with lifestyle changes. Those that are at moderate risk, and let's be fair, almost every moderate risk high cholesterol patient is probably treated by a statin. And some of them are well controlled, some of them are not at target, some of them are statin intolerant. And then you have those that are really high risk, and they are a statin intolerant, or they may be a candidate for a new medication like the PCSK9 technology, therapeutics that are now available. This is a monoclonal antibody as opposed to a statin. What this shows you is that every single patient with cholesterol falls somewhere in these buckets that you see here. Every single one. The question is, which patients are you going after when developing your product, and what? Because if you play in all those boxes, you're doing the wrong thing. Your product will have a label that will position you to basically play in one of these boxes that you will see in a moment. Step number 2, you identify your distinct market segments. You group them where there are similarities and or keep them separate. And you can validate this through qualitative or quantitative market research. When we did this, we found there were 4 bucket of categories of patients that you see here. In other words, those patients that are at low risk or well controlled, they're treated by their GP. But when patients are not at treatment goal or they're statin intolerant, they may need the help of a specialist, like a cardiologist, endocrinologist, internal medicine. And that's why we see these segments come down to the bottom here, those 3 columns that you see here. These are all very unique and distinct segments of the cholesterol, of the patient market for cholesterol. Finally, you can characterize them. I mean, you can characterize them any way that you want, any way that informs your organization. Here, we characterize them just by putting some numbers around how many patients fall into these different buckets. 33% of patients are at target. 2/3 are not at target. That's a lot. There's a smaller number of patients are intolerant to statins, and then you have another group here who may qualify for a more costly monoclonal antibody compared to a statin. You can also identify your competition in each of these. Who's playing here? Who are the competitors here? Who are the competitors here? You can characterize these in any way that you want, as long as it informs your organization on what your strategy should be. Finally, so the key takeaways for market segmentation: proper market segmentation allows you to better target your go-to market. And then you're able to better position your product in that target market, and it results in optimized outcomes. So that is our session, and we're going to take a break.